Hello and welcome back to the Talking with Apes podcast. Today we are here with episode 14 and we have a very special guest with us. His name is Sander Claessens and he recently finished his master's thesis in anthropology, where he discussed how it is to work for an app, how it is to work as a food deliverer, for example, working for a Deliveroo, where your main communication to your boss is through an app, and how that impacts your work-life feeling, by lack of better words. So you followed three separate delivery drivers who work by bike, and you also went into the field yourself to get first-hand experience of how it is to live through that. And you talked in your paper about two main concepts. First of all, the concept of alienation, and second of all, the concept of how time is impacted by working in this way, like your feeling of time, the time experience. Maybe let's start with alienation, because it's a very famous concept, I think, to some extent, or to some people. And maybe you could still like give first a short explanation of what it is, and then we can go from there.
Yeah, sure.
For the people who haven't read Marx.
Yeah, you're starting with the most difficult concept in the thesis, I think.
Let's get it out of the way.
Yeah, let's maybe explain that first.
Yeah, exactly.
So alienation, basically, so it's a hot topic in philosophy, in sociology, anthropology. A lot of people have different interpretations of what alienation is. But I think that if we need to explain alienation, like the most, it's a Marxist concept, and the best thing you can do is just like, what did Marx say and what did Marx mean when he talked about alienation? And so, like, if you would give like a very short definition, I'd say that it's about the fact that people produce stuff, they produce commodities, but the result of this process of production is taken away from you. It's alienated from you. Because if you say that, if you talk about alienation, it means that something is taken away from you, something is alienated from you. So that means that there is a sort of power, how do you say this, disbalance between two classes, actually. And so in capitalism, workers produce commodities and they produce value, they produce wealth, but the result of this production goes to the capitalists. And this has like a lot of implications. First of all, you get alienated from the result of the production itself, so the thing that you create. Second of all, you get alienated from the whole process, because you don't control the process, you don't have anything to say about the process. So, for example, if you work in a car factory, you do a specific task, like certain bolts that you insert into the car, but you don't have anything to say about about all the other stuff in the production process. And the car, it's the capitalist who decides to whom he sells the car, and so on and so on. So the whole production process, that's the second thing you are alienated from. Thirdly, there's the aspect of the fact that you're alienated from the other workers, because you have this specific task, and everyone should do his or her specific task in the fastest way possible to have like the biggest production possible. So you're alienated from the other workers, and the last thing that you're alienated from is the fact that like from nature, actually. That's how Marx explains it, because of course, to produce stuff, you get stuff from nature. There are basically two things that give stuff value. It's the fact that people put time to create it, and second of all, that they use nature, they use resources for this. And so you're also alienated from the resources from nature itself. And so These four aspects are basically, in short, what alienation is.
Yeah. No, that's a lot of information, and I think we can all recognize this in our, like, if you've ever done a student job or something, you are a very small part of a company and you don't have any say in it, and it does make you feel less connected to your work than if you're, for example, if you want to make a painting and you go out, you look into the materials, you're like, oh, okay, this material, this color is made from this stone, and you buy that color and you start like mixing it, you paint it, and then you maybe like sell it, or you give it to a friend, and you see the result of your work. It's you feel every step of that, and the gratification is much larger, even though you might have created the same value in your student job.
Yeah, exactly. And so, because I also talk about the objective and the subjective side, and so I think personally that alienation is a super important and useful concept to explain a lot of like psychological, socio-psychological problems in society, because there's an objective basis in capitalism, the fact that you don't have control over the products of your labor. That's just the objective, like class verhoudingen. I don't know what's the
relations.
Class relations in capitalism, and the result is like on the subjective side, the fact that there are a lot of burnouts, that people hate their jobs.
There's a lot of bullshit jobs.
There's
people
a lot of
that
bullshit
identify
jobs,
like
exactly.
my job isn't actually contributing anything to society anymore.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, and like the example that you give, like if you're painting something, you really like a point that I make in my thesis is that people are creative creatures, and like that's the big distinction between humans and animals. We can very consciously think and produce and plan in our heads in a creative manner what we want to achieve or produce. And if you're painting, then you're the master of the production process, so to speak, of the painting that you're making. And it brings a lot of more satisfaction if you're painting, because you're really controlling what you're doing. And this is the big problem with alienation, that all the mental problems and the feeling that workers get. It's a complex concept, but I think it's very useful to explain a lot of problems on the subjective side of capitalism, how people think and feel and so on.
So let's talk about Deliveroo, because that's where you have the most experience right now. How does it tie in with the workers you've worked with, Mohamed, Sid, Youssef?
Mohamed, Sid, and Farouk.
Sorry. God, my name knowledge.
We were also discussing 2 minutes how one specific name in your thesis was to be pronounced.
Yes, and I totally fucked it up in my intro.
It was Farouk, I guess.
No. It was a name that looked a bit Slavic.
Oh yeah, no, that was something else. It was a Russian name.
Okay, yeah, an author. Okay,
yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
Damned Russian Marxist.
No, but we also discussed how we would name the feeling of time in relation to your work, and that was what I found hard in the intro. But sorry, let's continue.
So you mean the concept of alienation? How does it tie up with?
How did you experience it within the people you followed and within yourself when you were working at Deliveroo?
So. I worked for delivery for like a month. I also have a part-time other job, and I was part-time studying. So I did like 5 sessions. So I'm not the biggest Deliveroo rider around, but I follow 3 other people. So Farouk, Mohamed, and Sid. So if they're listening now, hi to them. What I think is important is that a thing that Deliveroo does is they want to make you believe that you control the whole process of your labor. And I make a distinction between like something that has historically grown. I think that is that in pre-capitalist systems and societies, you'd have like more control over your time in the sense that a lot of like, for example, in prehistory times, you would produce or you wouldn't even produce. You would hunter-gatherer societies. You would just hunt and gather until you have enough. So actually, research shows that these people worked like 4 hours a day, and we like the idea that we need to work 8 hours a day is like so mainstream. But in pre-modern times, it wasn't at all the case.
Yeah.
So, and in pre-capitalist times, there was a lot of more like the task-oriented time that you do a certain task until you satisfied the needs that you have in life, and then you stop. So the feeling of control over your own time was bigger, and the time experience was what I call in my thesis more on like subjective time. So you really have more this qualitative feeling of I am the master of my own time. And in capitalism, what I call the objective time,
with a clock present, ticking in, ticking out of a
exactly.
job.
So the fact that you can objectively measure the time, and like the clocks are like before capitalism, it wasn't dominant at all. But with capitalism, because you had to time production and production was going faster, clock time became more dominant, and so objective time became more dominant. And I think what Deliveroo tries to do is make you believe that this isn't relevant at all, and that you can decide for yourself when you ride and what orders you accept, and so on, and that you have control over this whole process. But that's the interesting part, because
it does have some qualities of the pre-industrial society. For example, in Europe, it has the element of pre-industrial Europe, in the sense that people owned their own like spinning wheel to make the cloth, and all the there was a certain amount of machinery is the wrong word, I guess, to use in the sense, because it was mostly like wooden things. We're not talking about steam engines yet, but people owned their means of production to a certain degree, though on a very small scale, of course. And these apps and like Deliveroo, they kind of also push you back with you own your bike, and you are your own boss. You're kind of they kind of push you a bit back in that, or they give you the illusion, it seems, of that a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. And so because there's a debate, there's a theoretical debate if it's true that you own your own means of production, or if these things aren't like means of subsistence, because you need them to survive. So there's a debate, and I'm not gonna delve into that, but there's a debate what are the means that you own. Deliveroo, it's true that you need to have your own bike, you need to have your own phone. It costs money. If a lot of my like all three of my correspondents had bike problems, they need to pay a bike maker to fix their bike, and so on. So what Deliveroo does is give you this sentiment that you aren't alienated, actually, that you control this process, and that you are your own boss. That's really the ideological narrative that Deliveroo uses to convince people to work for them. And what's interesting is that it really depends on your situation if you buy into it. For example, if you are a student, Deliveroo seems like actually a fun way of getting money, because you have class at random levels, and sometimes you go out and you go to a bar or you go to party with friends or whatever. You have a big social life, and it's really like, it's not a fixed scheme. You don't have any kids and so on. You're really like
there's less of a daily rhythm that you are
exactly
obliged to follow.
Exactly. So for students, for example, if it's your student job, Deliveroo is quite useful, actually. You can really decide when you have to work. But if your if the way you are dependent financially of your work, like the bigger that gets, the crappier the job is actually. And because one of my correspondents is a person who doesn't have any papers, who doesn't have a legal status in Belgium, who uses the account of somebody else to earn money. And this person, like there's a whole business of people asking, like taking a bit of the
middleman.
They
basically vouch with their ID card. So.
Yeah, and they take a bit of the profit is the wrong word, but like the revenue that you make, and in return you can use their account because you don't have a legal status and so on. So there's also that dirty business besides of the already dirty business of Deliveroo.
Lovely.
Like for that person, for example, Deliveroo is like the only alternative. So he was the person I followed with that situation was wasn't critical at all for Deliveroo, but also he told me experiences in which he said, yes, if I don't make enough money at the end of the month, I can pay the rent of the crappy apartment he lived in, or I can't buy enough food and so on. So the more urgent your financial needs become, the more clearer it becomes that you aren't actually your own boss at all, because you're very dependent on an app that like tells you when you have to work. And that's also important. It's only the app who knows whether there are enough orders to fulfill and so on. So and because I in my thesis I use a term, it's called the black box. And what's important there is that you don't know how the app functions and on what calculations it sends you orders and so on.
It's not open source.
Yeah, it's not open source at all. So it's an algorithm. It even has a name. It has like a boy's name. I don't know the name exactly, but it's like they really gave it a name as well.
Oh, well.
It's maybe interesting to research that, but nobody knows how it functions except for Deliveroo, and that's the only thing that Deliveroo owns is the infrastructure, the servers, and the app. So you're really dependent on something in which you completely don't know how it functions. And so that's I think the big link with alienation. So they make you believe that you're not alienated, because you're your own boss. But the bigger your financial needs become, the more you realize, okay, I just have to follow this app and hope for the best. And this day I earn like 100 euros, and the other day I only earn 50 euros. So in practice, you aren't your own boss at all. And I think that like the process of alienation is also present with Deliveroo.
I think you also sense it with people that go and work for Deliveroo, like people that I've talked to before they go to work there. They talk about, I just need some money in some way, and this is the only way that works for me. So I'm just gonna do this. There is no connection to what you're doing. There is no connection to the company there. It's not like if someone goes to work for I don't know, a shoe company and they really like shoes and that's why they choose that company. There's very little motivation other than the money, and I think that's fine if you're like a student, like you said. But if you're also dependent on it and you have to work much more hours, it can become very draining. I think everyone would.
I think it is, as you said. It's not. It doesn't treat the people that work for Deliveroo with quotation marks as its employees. It doesn't. It completely distances itself from that. Yeah. In that sense, it's the most bare bone, like skeletal version you could have of a company, because it has ditched every part of itself that it doesn't have to necessarily hold on to. And in that sense, it's maybe not like a traditional company. It acts more like a tradesman almost. It says like, oh, this thing needs to be moved from place A to B, and it's not even a logistics company that says we have a truck or we have people that can move your stuff from point A to point B. It just says will provide you with the kind of social contract you need to, to connect the person producing the thing with the person that transports the thing with the person that needs the thing or is going to buy the thing. And it's in that sense, it doesn't have any intention of providing any of those other things, it seems. And it's, I fully agree. It's this very weird mix of it creates the delusion of autonomy. It isn't actually autonomous because you don't have any control of it, and at the same time, it does make all the couriers wear its jackets, and it acts as if it has employees. It creates the illusion of having employees.
Exactly.
But at the same time, it fully distances itself completely from employees, and it acts more as a sole provider of a social contract you need for a
what
minute.
kind of contract do you actually have when you work for Deliveroo?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting one. So maybe to explain that, I think it's important, like with the gig economy, because that's what Deliveroo is. It's what they call gig work. So a gig is like when you one day you do this, the other day you do that, and it's from task to task. Basically, it's that kind of work. And in the gig economy, you have like Uber for taxi drivers as well, Uber Eats as well. You have Deliveroo, you have TaskRabbit. I don't know if it exists. I'm not too familiar with like the gig work in which you... I think we have Fiverr and stuff like that. Yeah. So if you pay somebody to translate something,
problematic. As someone working in the creative industry, on Fiverr, you don't just compete with people. Like, for example, a company in Belgium can go out and hire someone in India to make a flyer for them and pay them like 30 euros, and that's enough for them because the conversion rate and everything makes that also a lot more money, and that way
it is a good tip.
It's it's just you can't compete with that if you want to work as a freelancer here.
Of course, but like, so what all these platforms, all these digital platforms have in common is the fact that you have a triangular relationship. So you have a customer who has a certain need. For example, with Deliveroo, you need food. You have the restaurant, which is basically, what you would call them the producer of the food. What Deliveroo does is just facilitate a transaction between the customer and the producer. It's the same with Fiverr, for example. It's just a platform, and like what Deliveroo does is it takes a certain rent. So it's Deliveroo doesn't offer productive labor, which like actually contributes to society at all. It's just like some form of parasitical rent that it just takes from the transaction between two people.
Or the extremely bare minimum in the development of their algorithm. But nothing.
I mean, most of their profits are probably spent on commercials and stuff like that.
They are their brand and they're their algorithm, the servers on which they run, which they probably have to pay another company to host. I imagine they don't have their own infrastructure there either. And then their name, I guess.
Yeah, but so they don't have like a lot of official employees. It's just employers. What's the...
Employees is the people that work.
Exactly.
Are the people that provide.
The providers, so to speak.
If you can call them employers, because
because they don't consider themselves to be. It seems.
But like so basically like I already said, the only thing that a platform provides is the technological infrastructure and the app and the servers and so on, and this leads to a very ambiguous kind of relationship, because they really want to make people believe, like the customers, the riders, but also policymakers, that this is independent work and you're a small independent worker, and so
you have a self-employment contract.
Yeah, so this leads to...
It changed over time, right?
It changed over time. It leads to, in different countries, to all this kind of weird, sketchy, kind of official... hoe zeg je dat? Statuten?
I mean, we can go for a moment into the article you sent us on that one. In the beginning, they had in 2018 in Belgium they had an other in between, Smart, which acted as a I don't know how to translate it, but or how to say it. It tried to normalize or turn the relationship of that weird, ambiguous new platform economy more into a recognizable, like old-fashioned one in a certain sense. It acted as a buffer between the weird platform, which got to deal with independent people.
Exactly. It got kind of weird contracts. That's the word I was looking for. You get these weird contracts, but like it's really different in different countries. In Belgium, they used to use Smart, which was like another company that Deliveroo hired to find a system to hire independent Deliveroo riders. So a really complex structure. Right now, actually the platform companies put pressure on our previous federal government, and now you have something which is called a peer-to-peer contract, because it's like this. They also really use this philosophy of peer-to-peer, which in a sense is something positive because you have people providing other people stuff on their own terms, but like if you put it in the hands of a big multinational corporation, they use it to make disgusting amounts of profit and exploit workers. And the peer-to-peer contract is actually that it's a kind of independent contract, but not really. So you're independent, but you're supposed to the peer-to-peer contract
10% fee or like tax, and then there is basically no regulations that apply any further.
Exactly. So between 2018, I think, and 2020, you didn't have to pay taxes at all until like 6,200 euros, something like that. Yeah. And now you have to pay 10% taxes. I don't know, like in 2021, why they changed that, but like it's a specific contract that, in my knowledge, only exists in Belgium. In other countries, you really have different situations. There have also been court cases, I believe, in Spain, in which like lawyers actually made the case that this isn't independent contracting at all. These are workers, and so in several European countries, there were court rulings against Deliveroo saying that you need to pay them as workers because they're workers. So it's really different in different countries. But right now in Belgium, we have the peer-to-peer contract, which if you are a student or just somebody who wants to earn up to 6,200 or 300, it also changes every year, euros a year, then you use that contract. You can also be an official independent contractor,
which comes with its own administration.
And that's what I think it's completely absurd. You have to be ingeschreven.
Signed up for.
Yeah, you need to sign up at what they call the ondernemingsbank.
Oh yes, so and that comes with its own fees, etc.
Yeah. So the ondernemingsbank is really the institution. If you are a small and independent business, then you are in the ondernemingsbank.
Yes,
you have your own number.
Part of the long list of companies and organizations.
Exactly, and so you imagine that you have, I don't know, you're a hairdresser and your small hairdresser salon is like in the ondernemingsbank. And for example, my dad is a farmer, so he's in the ondernemingsbank with his own farming company, which are all small businesses. And then you have Deliveroo riders, like just people with their own bag, but with a bag, with a jacket, with a helmet, which isn't at all something they like created or something, which is something that Deliveroo gave to them, which they need to work. So they're completely dependent on Deliveroo for that, but they are treated the same way as like small independent businesses. And there's also a difference. So like if you have the small independent contract, then you also need to pay more taxes on what you earn.
If you're a zelfstandige, like a self-employed person in Belgium, you also have a minimum of money that you have to pay every year, which is around 800 euros, if I remember correctly, from when I looked it up because I wanted to be self-employed. So, and plus, if you want to just start signing up, you also have to pay 90 euros, just administrative fees.
Yeah, exactly.
You have the fees of like the province like tax, which is 60 euros every year. And that is for the minimum. Like that's what I had to pay as a student, self-employed person.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So just
up.
like, for example, the first week, if you're not that good of a delivery writer yet, is basically you just working to pay for the fees that you had to pay to set up that company. Like,
yeah, exactly.
It's just also a bad start. Like it's a bad feeling in the beginning of starting to work.
And if you're doing the work, it feels completely dishonest because like you're completely, as I told already, you're completely dependent from the app and even from certain materials that they give you. So that's maybe also important. So right now, because that also changes, in the beginning you had to pay for like the Deliveroo bag and stuff. You even had to pay for that. Now they give it to you for free, but like the bike is something that you need to own yourself. But like there's certain tools that you're still dependent from because you can't
you need to have them yourself.
Exactly. So you need to send a picture of your Deliveroo bag to Deliveroo to prove that you have the right equipment. So I mean, you're even dependent from Deliveroo in a certain way with your equipment, and also there's the app that just tells you what to do. So
and then you also don't have any guarantee that once you clock in, you will have work immediately.
Exactly. So another big difference, also something that has changed is, which I think is really very advantageous.
Advantageous.
Thank you. For Deliveroo is the fact that before you had like at the beginning of every week, I think it was Monday morning. You had different slots to fill in when you wanted to write. So it was in a certain way a bit regulated who works when, and they gave the first people who could fill in the slots were the people who worked the most. So they already had an advantage situation. And then the less you worked, the crappier the slot that you could fill in was. And at a certain moment, like there were enough riders, okay, the slots are closed, every slot is filled in. Right now, I think it's since March 2020, which is when the lockdown began. So I don't know if it's a coincidence or not. I don't think so actually. But there's a system in which you just open the app and you go. And you open the app, you push a button that you're online, and you wait for an order. And so the fact that you don't need to reserve a slot anymore means that there's a lot more competition between the riders because you just go, and if it's the app tells you when it's busy or when it isn't busy. But the fact that there aren't any slots anymore, that there aren't any slots anymore makes that okay. You don't have you're not sure. Like for example, with a slot, you can know, okay, there are 10 people riding at this hour. I'm one of those 10 people. It's okay. But if there are like, I don't know, 20 people and you don't know how many people are riding, you have a big competition between. I think it increases competition between the workers.
And they also don't pay by the hour anymore.
No,
they used to do. Now they just pay by gig or by the delivery you make.
Exactly. There was a minimum like an hourly fee that you got. They also stopped that. For example, takeaway, they do have an hourly wage, and they do have official contracts. Not to say that takeaway is a nice company or anything, but it's just interesting that you have like the differences between the different companies.
Yeah, that it does give you a little bit more of a security if you have it.
Yeah, I think so. But then again, I didn't research takeaway, so I'm not an expert on that. But that's maybe something also worth mentioning. Like I already said, like the competition between the workers. I think that's also very important because the fact that you get a piece wage, which is also something Marx developed in his theory. that's actually something in Marxist time he already saw. So like the beginning of the 19th century, for example.
That's how the factories used to work
with piece wage.
Yeah.
For example,
you produce 10 pots, you get paid for 10 pots.
Exactly.
You produce 10 pots, but one of them is insufficient for us to sell. You get paid 9 pots.
Exactly, and so you create competition between workers because you want to earn more than the other worker, and if the other worker falls ill, it means that you can create more pots, for example. And like at the end of the 18th, beginning of the 19th century, for example, in England, at the docks, there were like workers who need to carry loads in ships, for example. And they got, it was really like, I don't know, like the gig economy functions actually. So there were just contractors there who were like, okay, who wants to, I don't know, load this material in this certain ship today. We facilitate the transaction. So they're the ship owners who want that their ships get loaded. These are the people willing to do it. We just provide a contract. We take the ship owner pays us a bit to facilitate this transaction, and then there were just people getting paid. I don't know, by the box or something that they loaded onto the ship. So it's something that in the beginning of capitalism already existed, because it was like the very premature form of capitalism was a new system, and so the very how do you say it? The premature way of exploiting people, I would say, was in the beginning of capitalism was there because it breaks resistance of workers. They don't organize collectively. They don't have the same standards. So you really divide them, and you really make them believe that work is something individual instead of something collective, which guarantees that you can exploit people really, really well. And Deliveroo does exactly that. Something that already, like, that's interesting. It's just in Dutch we say oude wijn in nieuwe zakken.
Old wine in a new bag.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's
because
a beautiful.
You drink wine from a bag, of course.
Yeah. So, but like really
beautiful Dutch saying.
Yeah, I think it's really it fits perfectly.
Yeah,
it really reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen the movie Luidi di Bicyclette. It's also about a guy in Italy who tries to get a job, and then suddenly there's a lot of jobs for people with bikes, and then he goes out and he does all these things to get a bike, and then the bike gets stolen, and like the rest of the movie is just him trying to get like a bike. And it's a really slow movie, but it was like Italian realism, like a lot about social issues and stuff like that, and it does portray it very well. It is a bit of a slow movie because it's just literally a guy trying to get a job.
Yeah.
But I think it's pretty good in showing how, like, also just how much time he spends in order to be able to work. It's so much energy, etc., that he does not get paid for, even though all he wants is a job.
Yeah.
Since you mentioned resistance, and you're talking about the issue with finding a job itself, I do want to, for the last 15 minutes or something we have, I find the most interesting part of it, the fact that the labor laws are completely incapable, or the old labor laws are insufficient for this kind of system, but also the difficulty trade unions have adapting to this model for a number of reasons. I mean, because it doesn't work at all like the system they're used to. The trade unionism, like we have it in, I think, Belgium, but also in the UK, etc., is designed for big production units, like a factory, a place, systematic production. You are an employer of a company. And now you have these people, which I believe from your thesis and the article, have an average of like 2 months that they stay with Deliveroo, and that is an average which has a lot bigger extremes, a lot as well. So it seems to be extremely difficult for the unions to get a grip or to organize them, or they don't seem to organize in a union. Yeah,
exactly. So like the big difference, of course, when you have when you work in a factory and you're all at the same chain of production or the same factory line, and is the fact that it's because labor is something collective. It are laborers who collectively produce value, and it's very clear if like this like there's also like an objective and a subjective part of it. It's the objective part is it's the division of labor, and you do this and you do that, and at the factory line this is you each have your specific task to produce as efficiently as possible to gain more profits. So that's like the objective side of the exploitation, but the subjective side is also that laborers who produce together also create a collective consciousness. And they are literally next to each other. So as a union organizer, you can gather all the workers because they're in the same workplace, and you can easily organize them. But with Deliveroo, like you said, the average is like 2 months that people do it. It's really funny. Your workplace is it's interesting. Your workplace is the city, and you see these people. They're very visible. You see Deliveroo, Uber Eats, whatever. You see them in the streets, but they are because they are so-called self-employed, because they are independent contractors, because there's competition between these workers. It's really, really hard to organize them, and so I didn't delve a lot into the organizing aspect in my thesis, but what I noticed is that like for example my respondents weren't unionized at all. I know there's ACV freelancers. That's an initiative to organize self-employed workers in the gig economy. So that's a new thing that they invented. There's also, I think that the transport section of the Socialist Union also tries to organize these people. I went to one action in Brussels once, but I know it's really difficult to organize these people. Because, I mean, they're constantly all around. It's not a collective moment that they take breaks or whatever. So yeah, it's really difficult to organize them, and to also, because like I already explained, some of them really believe that they're self-employed. So how do you make them believe that, okay, but you're being
but you're being have fooled. Colleagues, and you're
being fooled. You're not self-employed.
Thing you can
And so what's also, I think, very important, which I really maybe want to stress out, is the fact that this kind of model, the outsourcing of certain aspects of the tasks that you need to do, the flexibilization of labor. This is something that you see like for the last 40 years or something in like all of the industrialized world. Because, for example, other interesting examples the gig economy is really the extreme example of the flexibilization and outsourcing of work and tasks of work. But for example, like HelloFresh deliverers, these are also independent contractors, so they need to provide their own camionette,
like truck,
their own truck that they with which they deliver the food. For example, I know at DHL they also use independent self-employed people more and more to deliver their goods and so on. So you see that this is really
it is popular. It is popularized, or it is growing.
It's growing, and it's in different forms. So the gig economy is just one of the many forms in which this trend is. In which way we see this trend, and it's because it's cheaper for companies. They can higher the rate of exploitation of people. They can they can make bigger profits with this, and they can break resistance very easily, etc. So it's really a trend that we see in very different ways in the industrialized world, and the gig economy is just one of them.
Yeah, I think what you said about breaking resistance, it's also hard to organize these people if, for example, the people that are working for Deliveroo full time or, as much full time as they can get it, versus the students, etc., that work there. You put two groups with completely different interests against each other, and if for example the people that try to work full time would go on a strike, that doesn't mean that the students would, because maybe they're satisfied with how it functions, because for them it's much better deal. So that way the company doesn't necessarily have as big of a loss. They could just hire more students, or there's a lot of ways to it's not like when the LAN is like we strike and there's no transport,
and
like
there's no alternative there. Luckily, I mean, they tried to liberalize the public transport, and they already did it for like the buses that you need to call. So I mean, but luckily there still isn't like an alternative to the LAN. So if the LAN strikes, there aren't any buses. But Deliveroo, okay, if a bunch of workers decide to strike, okay, that means that in a couple of days we can open up applications. We can call all these people who filled in an application but aren't you can start tomorrow. Okay, here's your bag. Just go for it. And they just replace the workers who are on strike, for example. Yeah. So it's really difficult to organize them. Yeah.
And again, they did organize a strike. Or they have been organizing some strikes. But one of the difficulties is, they for example, they demand to get an employee status, but of course, Deliveroo says like we're not in the business of employing people. So you're into that entire weird limbo place where
and I know that I think in Ghent they tried to strike once, and what they did was because I write in my thesis about the Couriers Collective. It's a collective, like they are active in Brussels and Ghent, but that's it. So I don't know how well they succeed in organizing, but I think it's really interesting that there already are like experiments with organizing them. But I think they did a strike once in Ghent, and they also convinced certain restaurants to
boycott
Deliveroo and to not accept orders when the strike was happening. So that's interesting. That I think that you need to. But then again, I'm not the union organizer. But I think that you need to find alliances with the restaurant owners, which isn't easy because they also profit from the fact that people order with Deliveroo. Maybe the official workers with Deliveroo, like who controls the apps and so on, and also make clear that they are also being exploited because they also contribute to Deliveroo, but it's not like they have anything to say about the profit. So I mean, you need to find alliances, I think. But that's up to the organizers, I think, to experiment and to find whatever works best for these people.
Do you have hope for that happening? Do you think it's on the right track?
I think so, because I mean, if they were able to organize workers more and more at the end of the 18th and the beginning of the 19th century, in which like the exploitation was very, like, it's still harsh today, but like it was extremely harsh. And we also the film Dance, for example, we all saw it.
Situations were worse. We can say that. I mean, people starving in
factories.
In factories.
That's something we luckily don't see anymore. In Europe, exactly.
Because that's the other challenge. Like you said, like you can order like a piece of work from an Indian guy.
Yeah.
But there is the issue, because the Indian guy on one hand needs a job too, or needs to make money too. But you would want for him to also have like then the same standards, so he doesn't.
Exactly. Like what I said before is not the problem. Is not that he asks for 30 euros. The problem
but I think it's a point I wanted to emphasize again. The other challenge is you also need to do it now on a global scale. So in that sense, it has become harder.
But like if I'm optimistic,
at least for certain apps.
But I think that if they were able to like, there's what the things that the labor movement in history already achieved, I think that it's possible, and I'm rather optimistic. I always believe that things go like things can go worse sometimes need to become worse before they get better, before you really create the momentum to wake people up and to organize them and so on. But that really depends on the determination of the people, sensibilizing and mobilizing and organizing people. But I think that the challenges that the labor movement has conquered in the past, I think that they're also possible to conquer this. So I'm rather optimistic. And what I think is also important, something that I also want to emphasize actually, is that this isn't a debate about are we for or against new forms of technology, but this is a debate about how do we use them. Because the fact that, I mean, capitalism, it is something Marx said, is that capitalism develops the modes of production, and they become more advanced and so on, and the means of production, they become more advanced. So we have all these new kinds of technology, and we have great things like social media and like apps, which can really make our lives more comfortable and so on. But they are used with a profit motive by multinational corporations. And so this isn't the debate about are we for or against new forms of technology. I'm not against ordering food with an app, but I'm against the fact that they aren't paid well for that, and the fact that it's being used by big corporations to make a lot of money and so on.
It's a bit like the algorithm of Facebook, etc. It's not necessarily you have a social media platform. It's like, what are the parameters by which this algorithm functions? Like, what is the goal? Is it meant to, or like Amazon, is it meant to push all of the money you can find into the pockets of Jeff Bezos or Mark Zuckerberg, or like, is the goal to tie people or lock them to their screen for as long as possible, or is it to exploit them, to make them do as many deliveries for as little money as you have to pay them? Or is the parameter and the goal of the application and the algorithm to provide a useful service with, for example, optimize for human dignity and for social respect, etc.?
I think more philosophically speaking, it's also a big problem that we see nowadays, the villainization of just resting. Like, like, for example, Deliveroo, they don't pay you if you're waiting for your next order, although you're actually like working. Like for my student job, I work at an escape room, and sometimes there is only one group in there, or there is like no group for another hour, and I have to wait for the next group to enter. And like it would be insane for me to clock out and then clock back in when the group is there, because I'm not allowed to leave. I can't just like, of course I can do whatever I want in that hour, but I have to still be around for the next group to arrive. So I'm still working. I'm still not free to do whatever I want. And I think that should be very clear, that when you are at a place where you have to be in order to continue to work, you should be paid, because you are not doing whatever you want. You are not free. You are working.
Exactly, yeah. And so, because that's also a big point in my thesis, like our time is commodified. And so time is money is something that literally it's like... it's what capitalism is all about, I think, like that's the thing with capitalism. So you aren't supposed to be paid when you aren't working, we aren't producing value, because otherwise the company that pays you would be a waste, and you because you aren't producing value at certain moments, and so they won't pay you, because they would that would mean less profits, and so I think that like what work should be in a post-capitalist or in a socialist society, I think it's about, how do you say this, about the needs of the people and the planet, and work should be something that emancipates people, like you work not because certain companies need to make a lot of profit, but you work to contribute with your productive labor to society, and the wealth we decide collectively of what should be done with it. So also that, and like the concrete consequence of that is also that your work is meaningful, and it's not problem that you are paid when you aren't working, because there's like an hour which you explained where you don't have anything to do. That's not the point of work isn't to only be paid when a company decides it. No, the point is to emancipate yourself and to make a living and to contribute to society. And that's the big problem with the fact that time is money today, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I very much agree. I think this is a good note to end the podcast on. We thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
And,
Thank you. Sam.
I hope that you write many more interesting theses, or I don't know, what are you going to do now after your studies are complete?
So I'm actually working right now part-time for a student movement for COMAC, which is student movement of the PvdA, which is a Marxist movement. Yeah, you might have noticed already that I'm a Marxist, and so everything from a Marxist lens.
Oh my God!
You're inviting Marxist in your podcast. You should be ashamed.
God damn it, the last thesis was already about Marxist movies.
A trigger warning.
But that's basically my income today. So I wouldn't call it a job. I'm just lucky enough that I'm an activist. I'm also getting paid to have more time to be an activist. But I wouldn't call it a job. I'm just lucky I'm in that situation. But that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah.
Okay. So thank you for being here, and maybe we see you again sometime.
Sure.
Yes.
Bye. And
Bye-bye.
like,
Bye.
subscribe, and give us feedback if there's anything you want to hear, anyone we should invite. See you next time. Bye.